Hello, humans. Today I want to do some cases that are from a Song Dynasty doctor named Wáng Zhízhōng. He wrote a book called Zīshēng Jīng or Zhenzhou Zīshēng Jīng. So this is an acupuncture book, although he did mention herbs quite a few times in it, often, like one or two or three herb formulas, simple formulas, because he was writing an acupuncture book. So he didn't go deeply into herbs, but he thought we should practice all of it and not just lean only in one direction. But he wrote this book about mostly acupuncture point formulas to treat different conditions. This book has been translated by Yue Lu, who is friend of mine, and I helped edit it. But all of the cases in this slideshow are retranslated by me because I didn't want to steal her, translations. So Wang Zhizhong, you can see his dates. This is the Southern Song Dynasty. He lived in Zhejiang, and these are his dates. He wrote a lot of cases about himself and his mother. It seems, I don't know, I didn't count, but I feel like almost half of his cases are about himself and his mother. Um, so it's I find him amusing. I picture him as some like old guy who's still living with his mother. Well, they did that back then, and just spending a lot of time with his mom and worrying about her health and worrying about his own health and kind of almost like he has no one to talk to, so he just keeps talking in the book, writing in the book about his own problems. I don't know, but I just picture him as like an old guy who just really wants to share too much information sometimes. So, anyway, when any of these cases say I, it means him. It means Wang Zhizhong. Okay, so let's see. Um, these cases are organized by point or by 2-point formulas because that's how he organized his book. And he used a lot of points that, like, I never really thought much about that, didn't seem common to me. Some of them are more common, but he, for example, has quite a few cases on Du 22 Xinhui, which is Tutsun within the anterior hairline. He says, when I was young, I worked really hard. So once I was past my prime, I had coldness of the brain. Sometimes I drank too much liquor and my brain hurt as if it were being broken open. Later, due to moxa on this point, due 22, not only did I avoid a relapse of cold in my brain, but the other day I was drunk and my brain still had no pain. Generally, you should apply moxa to this point for cold in the brain. So, a cold kind of headache, maybe an ice cream headache. What do you think about that? Okay. Many of these cases he talked about multiple times. He talked about the same case again and again. So I didn't repeat cases when he retold them. He always used different language, but you could tell it's the same case. Here is another case, not himself. A scholar suffered hot pain of the brain. When severe, he would throw himself down from the bed and lean his head on the floor because the floor would be cooling, right? Or he'd pour cold water on himself to end the pain, but it didn't cease. He took various herbs, but nothing was effective. So someone told him to apply moxa on this point, Xinhui do 22, and he recovered. So even hot pain can be moxed, not only cold pain. So this is a thing in modern times. And actually in ancient times, there were different schools of thought on moxa. And some people were adamant that no moxa if there's heat in the body. And other people were saying, well, if you have some skills and you know how to do it, sure, you can do moxa even when there's heat. For example, if you're using grain of rice-sized cones, that's not adding a lot of heat to the body, even though it's stimulating the point in a different way than a needle might. However, even though I feel, for example, if somebody has heat above, that moxa on Yongcho and kidney 1 could help pull the heat down, I still wouldn't do moxa on a point on the head when there's heat in the head. Well, he did it, or somebody did it. I guess he was the doctor here. No, it says someone instructed him to apply moxa. So, okay, whatever. And here's his mom. My mother suffered a nosebleed. She quickly took herbs. In the past, these herbs were usually effective for people, but they were ineffective with my mom. So I reviewed some book, it's like was apparently quoted in Chen Fang, which says deviation of the mouth with incessant nosebleeds is called external bleeding of the brain. Apply 50 cones of moxa on due 23, Xiangxing. I still doubted that so much moxa on the head could be appropriate. So I only applied 7 cones of moxa and the nosebleed stopped. It returned the next day, so I again applied 14 cones of moxa and she recovered. Okay, so what was I going to say? Again, doing moxa on the head is going to draw more stuff up. So if this was nosebleed due to heat in the blood, I don't know that I would do this, but he did it and it seemed to work. So I think, cases like this can kind of stretch our understanding and ask us to look a little deeper into what moxa might be able to do. Okay. 50 cones on the head, though, would be quite a bit because heat rises. And so, if you do moxa on the feet, the heat will rise, but as it rises, it'll start to circulate. If you do moxa a lot on the head and there's heat, the heat has no place to rise to, so it just stays there and stagnates. Well, that's his case. Continuing on with nosebleeds, a soldier suffered incessant nosebleeds. So I taught him to apply moxa on this point, due 22, and he recovered. And someone else had not just a plain old nosebleed, but there was pus and blood coming out of the nose. So I taught him to apply moxa on this point, due 22. And when he recovered, I knew that due 22 in these 2 cases and due 23 in the previous case, they all treat nosebleeds. We do use due 23, but with a needle to treat nasal issues, especially if they involve heat, or we might even bleed this point. Well, okay, so this is a case about headwind, and headwind is chronic intermittent headaches. In some ways, they might be similar to migraines, but they're triggered by weather. And so someone suffered headwind for a long time. And I asked him to apply moxa to this point, due 22, and he recovered. However, a couple really important ancient acupuncture texts say that this point only treats diseases like nasal congestion, inability to smell. So I wrote these cases in order to let you know that, yeah, this point also can treat headwind and nosebleeds and other kinds of stuff. He's trying to fill in, indications that weren't passed along in the major books at his time. Moving on to due 20, he talks about a historical case. This is a pretty famous case. I've seen it in Zhenzhou Dacheng and other places. So, rumor has it that a doctor named Chen Menghe, who was a Tang Dynasty doctor, he was an imperial, worked on the emperor, and the emperor at the time was Gaozong. And Gaozong had headwind, those chronic headaches. His empress was Wu Zetian, who is kind of pretty famous and often very maligned because she actually became the only female ruling emperor of China. Of course, empresses can be the wife of the ruler and even have a lot of power, but she actually became the ruler herself. And, Chinese men didn't like that idea very much. So they often say bad stuff about her. And I'm sure she did bad stuff, but so do all the male emperors. I don't think she's any worse than any of the male emperors. Anyway, at this time, she's still not the, ruling empress, but she's Gaozong's wife or whatever. And so he has headwind, and this Dr. Chin wants to bleed him. And Wu Zetian says, "How dare you bleed the head of our most revered emperor?" But they overruled her, and so once it was pricked and bled a little, the headache immediately stopped. This is supposed to be due 20. This story, even though it doesn't say it in this part, this is due 20. It's under the heading of due 20. So the empress then, she was happy once he was better. And so she gave him golden silks. And because of this, we know that due 20 treats these kind of headaches, headwind. This one's bleeding, though. And here he is complaining about his own problems. So, in the past, I suffered heart qi. Whenever I thought too much, I had fright palpitations below the heart or self sorrow. I think this probably means feeling sorry for himself, sighing with emotions. I would apply Moxa on due 20. In this case, it's because due 20 lacks I'm sorry, in this case, it's because due 20 treats lack of strength in the heart and forgetfulness. And here's his mom. Mom had been chronically ill. She suddenly began weeping uncontrollably. I knew this was heart disease. By heart disease, that includes Shen. So I applied Moxa on due 20 and she recovered. Whenever I encounter worry and sorrow, I always apply Moxa on this point. Someone who has this kind of disease should not fail to believe it. And here's another one, do 20 on this slide, but the same patient also gets another treatment, which we'll see on the next couple slides. A scholar spoke wildly and abnormally and also wanted to beat people. So he's like having a manic episode or something. This condition lasted for several months. My opinion was that it was heart disease. So I applied Moxa on due 20 because Baihui treats heart disease. I find this slightly weird because, again, Moxa on the head will pull qi and yang and heat upward, and it sounds like he's already agitated. But you can obviously see from his cases that he doesn't worry about Moxa on the head in heat diseases. So that probably means he doesn't worry about Moxa anywhere in heat diseases, because the head would be the place you would most want to avoid if you were thinking that way. Well, so he applies Moxa on due 20 because it treats Shen disease. I also suspected that this same case could be ghost evils because, he's ranting and raving and saying crazy stuff. So I used Qin Chengzu's Moxa method for treating ghost evils. And then he explains what this method is. Put both thumbs together evenly and then quickly tie them securely with soft silk cord. Right where the flesh joins the nail, apply 7 cones of Moxa, burning all 4 places. I'll explain that. He recovered after this. So this is a thing you come across in old books periodically when there's somebody who's ranting and raving as if they're talking to ghosts. And some books will, he seemed to think it was an actual ghost, but some books will say as if they were talking to ghosts, which really means that they don't think it's a ghost, but this method may still do the job. Anyway, so this is basically lung 11. And you're supposed to tie the thumbs together, symbolic of binding the ghost, and then make moxa cones that are big enough to have like 1/4 of it on the thumbnail, 1/4 of it on the flesh below the thumbnail, another quarter on the other flesh and the other thumbnail. So it's sitting there between, so that's a pretty big cone if you put your thumbs together and look. This point is also called the hand ghost crying point. Spleen 1 is the foot ghost crying point. And this is one of Sun Simiao's 13 ghost points. So it's more or less lung 11, as I told you. And so this is going to hurt, but hopefully it'll get rid of the ghost. He says, furthermore, 2 sons of a noble also suffered this condition. So a doctor monk also applied moxa to these points, and these 2 sons recovered. Another not so common point, GB19, now Kong, now is brain hollow. So Cao Cao was, a famous guy in the Zhanguo, the Three Kingdoms period. And he suffered headwind. We already met headwind, those recurrent headaches. During episodes, he had derangement of the heart and dizzy vision. And Huachuo needled this point, and it was immediately cured. So this is Huachuo, and here's Cao Cao. Yeah, this is also a famous story that you come across in various places. Somebody named Cheng Junzhuo, who I don't know who that is. Yeah, I don't know. This is also a historical case. He suddenly suffered swelling of his cheek under his chin and under his chin. It was as big as a sheng. A sheng is different size in different periods, but it's a unit of dry measurement for grain, and it may have been about 1/10 of a liter, which isn't huge, but it's not tiny. So that's how big the swelling was. He had blockage of the throat, and he couldn't swallow water or food because this thing was swollen and blocking him. So a famous doctor, I think Tang Dynasty doctor named Zhen Chuan, needled this point, and he immediately recovered, this point being lung 11. Yeah. Okay, so we're moving on down to Ren 8. It's been passed down that the countenance, the facial complexion of some older people is childlike. This must be because every year they apply 1 cone of moxa, the size of a piece of mouse dung, on the umbilicus. So first off, it seems to me that only 1 cone of moxa a year shouldn't do very much. And like mouse dung, really? I mean, that's how they specified the size of cones, is by, comparing it to a grain of wheat, a grain of rice, a grain of millet, and so forth. But how big is mouse dung? Like a small grain of rice? That's really not very much moxa. But that's what it says. And he goes on to complain about his own problems again. I had suffered pain from a bee pattern. After I recovered, I suffered sloppy diarrhea for a long time. Not sure the connection, but maybe the connection is dampness. When I applied moxa on my umbilicus, I didn't have to rush to the toilet. I applied moxa for 3 days in a row, and I didn't have to rush to the toilet for 3 nights in a row. If applying moxa for sloppy diarrhea, the best is moxa on the umbilicus. And spleen 6 and other points are second best. They're okay, but they're not as good as Ren 8, according to him. And again, he's complaining about his health issues. After I was past my prime, I felt weakness in my left hand and foot. It sounds like maybe he had a minor stroke. When I happened to apply Moxa on this point, Ren 8, it recovered. Later, I heard a coworker say that they applied Moxa on this point for a lot of windstroke patients. After they used 100, 300, or even 500 cones, all their patients recovered. So why don't the old books say it treats windstroke? He complains. Yeah. Okay, so now he has a few things about the combination of Ren 9 and Ren 6, one below and one above the umbilicus. Ren 9 is Shui Fun, and it's famous for edema. And I think you're pretty familiar with Ren 6 if you're listening to this. Well, an old woman suffered stomach reflux. She vomited when she ate in the evening. I saw the chi coiling around her umbilicus and rotating. Wow, he must have amazing, vision for chi. So I selected Ren 9 and Ren 6 because it's coiling around her umbilicus. And, so he has those 2 points plus 2 points on the sides. Who knows if he chose the kidney points or the stomach points or the spleen points? Doesn't say. When she came back after this treatment, then I only applied Moxa on Ren 9 and Ren 6, not the points on the side. And she recovered. It was miraculously effective. Okay. And again, these 2 points. A doctor treated someone named Zīshēng, and I tried to look up if that's a famous person, but I couldn't find anything. So a doctor treated this person with herbs for edema for a long time, but it was ineffective. He had attended the patient for a long time. One day, he just suddenly, for no reason, applied Moxa on Ren 9 and Ren 6. The next morning, this person's cheekbones were more visible. His face was whittled down, like the edema had gone down a bit so you could see his cheekbones rather than having puffy face. That must be either upper edema or pretty severe edema if it's making his face puffy. So he says, I believe that Ren 9 can treat edema. A famous ancient acupuncture book, Mingtang, says applying Moxa on this point for water disease is very good. Water disease means edema. It must be because this point can separate water and does not allow reckless movement of water. So its name is Shui Fun, which is like water separation, something like that. And this is supposed to be the point where the small intestine sends the clear over to the urinary bladder and the turbid continues on into the large intestine. So it's separating the water out for the urinary bladder. A nobleman suffered panting for a long time, shortness of breath. When he could not lie down at night, he got up to walk. You can't lie down when you have severe shortness of breath. In the summer, he still wore clothes over the center of his back, the heart of his back. So I knew the disease was in the Gaohuang, which is the area below the heart and above the diaphragm. It's also, there's a point, UB43, that's called Gaohuang. And so he was keeping that area covered up when I guess other people were taking off their shirts because it's hot in the summer. So he recovered after Moxa and Gaohuang and stopped having this severe shortness of breath. And this is our last, oh no, we're not, sorry, almost, we're getting there. Stomach 36 and GB 39, excuse me. When applying Moxa for leg chi, these 2 points are important and they're the first part of the treatment to take care of the body. I suffered leg chi in the past. Leg chi has meant different things at different times. And so we're going to see what he means. it would not recur for several years if I didn't step on damp ground. But it occurred frequently if I stepped on damp ground. So once I realized that, I avoid stepping on damp ground. Whenever there's water or dampness, I don't dare let my shoes tread on it. Or if I stand on moist ground, I dare not stand there for long. I must frequently move my feet, and then I won't suffer this. But he's saying stomach 36 and GB 39 help, and we'll see him discuss these 2 points a little bit more. Someone suffered weak, skinny legs, but after applying Moxa on stomach 36 and GB 39, the legs were good as new. I knew even more what was said in some book that GB 39 is miraculous for treating leg diseases. Yeah, and if you look it up, for example, in Zhengzhou Dacheng, it includes a lot of that kind of stuff. But you know what else? Stomach 36 and GB 39 have been used, at least since the Tang Dynasty, preventively for windstroke. Moxa on those. But that's not for today's session. Okay, this one is our last one. Daimai, GB 26. A woman suffered red and white vaginal discharge, and somebody named Lin Chin, one of his colleagues or one of his friends, got the Zhēng Jīng, which may be Ling Shu, but I'm not sure. Anyway, got it from me, and so this Dr. Wang lent his book to Dr. Lin. And initially, he applied Moxa on REN 6, but it wasn't effective for the vaginal discharge. The next day, he tried applying Moxa on GB 26. And here's the interesting part. There was a ghost attached to her body. And it said, yesterday's Moxa was also good, but that Moxa yesterday on REN 6 didn't burn me. Today's Moxa burned me, so now I'm leaving. Please make an offering of liquor and food for me to help me on my journey. So the family did what the ghost said, and the disease was gone. This really happened, he said. So from having translated other cases that may involve ghost possession, it seems that the ghost made the woman speak these words. So that's how the ghost said it, is through the woman that the ghost was in, and then the ghost left, but the ghost needed something for the journey wherever the ghost was going afterwards. So ghosts can cause abnormal vaginal discharge. Well, ghosts are yin and damp is yin, and so maybe they contribute to the yin that trickles down and becomes abnormal vaginal discharge. Anyway, those are my cases for today. So, okay.